Hello, I am the Reverend Karen Mercer, and I am so delighted to serve at the Church of the Holy Nativity in Baltimore, Maryland, which is the parish of the late Reverend Dr. Paulie Murray. And if you don't know who Dr. Paulie Murray is or was, please spend some time researching who she was because she was a dynamic woman. I want to welcome you to Seek and Find a Journey to Navigating Life. This podcast is an extension of the Imani project, which is dedicated to uniting young adults aged 18 to 34. Our aim is to share what we think is some valuable information and some fun tidbits that can aid you on your journey through this thing we call life. We hope you'll find our podcast engaging and just keep coming back for more. Tonight marks our inaugural episode, and we're going to focus on healthy relationships. And this podcast is being aired following the Valentine's Day celebration that I'm sure many of you had. So, throughout our series of podcasts, we're going to interview various guests ranging from young adults to those a little bit older. And we're going to cover diverse topics we hope will captivate you. We definitely encourage your feedback, whether it's through email, and we'll talk to you more about how to drop us an email and let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to hear more of, what you'd like to explore more fully. We are definitely here to provide information and that we think would be of value to you. And the way we learn about that is if you tell us what you like. So, without any further ado, we're going to dive into our first episode. So, I am so excited now to be able to introduce our two guests for today's podcast, Ms. Tempest Anderson and Ms. Janice Graham. Both of them are, I would say, experts, even though they may not say so, but they are very involved in helping others to create, develop, and maintain healthy relationships. Tempest in her private practice, and Miss Graham in the work that she does as well. So, what I'm going to do is ask the two of you to just introduce yourselves by providing just a little bit of information about yourself. And whoever wants to go first, that's fine.
I can go
I can.
first.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm Tempest Anderson, and I'm currently a licensed counselor in the state of Virginia and North Carolina. I have my own private practice, empowerment counseling and coaching, LLC, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Janice.
I'm Janice Graham. I currently work in social work in the state of Virginia. I also have a business called Marriage Works Ministries where I work with couples and encourage them in how to continue to have a good relationship.
Great. So I know that you two are going to have a dynamic discussion today about healthy relationships, especially since we're just coming off of Valentine's Day. And I know that relationships have to be kind of paramount on a lot of people's minds right now, whether it was a good Valentine's Day or not so good Valentine's Day.
Right, right.
And so I'm just wondering, the work that you do, what do you notice about, especially around this time of year, what do you notice about the relationship, maybe counseling that you need to give people? Or because, holidays can be stressful and there are all these expectations around Valentine's Day. So just curious.
For me, it's giving your mate grace. A lot of times we put these expectations on people and we haven't had these prior conversations about what that looks like, what our expectation is. And holidays put that extra pressure on a relationship anyway because it's like, well, it's Valentine's Day and I need to get this and I want and I expect. And my question is, did you have that conversation with your mate? Because you may be under the impression that, oh, Valentine's Day, we're going to celebrate and we're going to do all these grand things. But if you haven't had that conversation with your mate, then a lot of times things get crossed, there's misunderstandings, and then the arguments come, and then that's where a lot of the breakups happen after Valentine's Day or after major holidays.
Yeah. I love what you shared about expectations. I love this quote I read in a book once. I think it's called Unveiled Wife, and it talks about how unmet expectations can lead to bitterness. And I think that can be all encompassing for many things, but especially within relationships, whether romantic or friendships as well. And when you mention Reverend Karen, of just what we talk about in our work, a lot of my work I find most recently, we talk a lot about relationships in general. So whether that's relationships with friends or family or more romantic relationships, it's kind of all across the board there of relationships coming up, whether in season of Valentine's Day or out of season of it. It's a hot topic indeed.
It's interesting because that was one of the things I thought about today as I was preparing for this is that, we talk about healthy relationships and we look at it in romantic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm wondering what the correlation is between healthy relationships outside of the romantic ones and how they correlate with healthy romantic relationships. If I'm not having positive relationships or healthy relationships with family or friends, what's that look like even in relationships with my partner? I'm just wondering, have you noticed those correlations or talked to your clients about that?
Absolutely.
I feel like I have too, and I feel like a lot of times it's that boundary setting. Like sometimes you have to leave those things that are friendship and that doesn't particularly go into your romantic relationship. Because sometimes we try to cross those things and they don't always cross well and they don't always blend well. Like sometimes you have these relationships with your friends that you can joke and it's like this jovial and you say things that your friend wouldn't take personally. But in a romantic relationship, you might say that same thing and it doesn't come across the same way. So a big thing for me that we talk about all the time is communication, and not just communicating, but effectively communicating. Like you can't just talk at somebody, but you got to have that communication one on one or back and forth for it to be effective, and that everybody gets the same understanding, and you're not walking away with, well, I thought he meant or I thought she meant this, but it's actually something else.
For sure. I would definitely say communication is key in that establishment, going back into that space of expectations, whether that's in romantic relationships or friendships or family. Like, have we developed one, what our relationship is? Have we defined the relationship? I think oftentimes, there can be maybe like a little bit of apprehension or even fear there for some folks to actually establish a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And they leave themselves in this like constant spiral and cycle of, are we friends? Are we not friends? Are we together? Are we not together? And I'm like, well, have we had the conversation?
Have the
Like, have we
conversation.
established a conversation?
Have
To
the conversation. It's
yes,
not that hard. And
yes,
I'm glad you said that because I was having a conversation with someone recently, and I'm like, did you have that conversation? Are you both on the same page where it comes to marriage and children and relationship and what it is that you want out of it? I'm like, at this point, we're older or we're grown adults and we shouldn't be playing those kid games or well I think and he should know and they should know, and you can't do
yeah,
that. Like you have to set the expectation. What am I expecting out of this relationship that I'm getting into? Whether it be a romantic relationship or friendship relationship, we should all be on the same page on what our expectations are. Because when the expectations aren't clear, then things turn into chaos a lot of times.
mhm. Yeah. It leaves a lot of room for assumptions to take
Mm-hmm.
place, and I think that's where feelings end up getting hurt. Whatever the relationship may be, because those expectations and even boundaries haven't necessarily been established yet. And I love what you talked about, Janice, of like people saying like, "Oh, I think they should know this," or "How would they know?" is usually my question. How would they know? How would
Yes,
they know that that's the way you feel? Or how would they know that's the way that you think or what you desire if you haven't clearly communicated those things? Not a bad thing. Let's just have a conversation.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times people are fearful of that having the conversation because they think that
Sure.
they take it in a negative way. Well, you want to talk. What do we want to talk about? What did I do
Mm-hmm.
wrong? And it's not always that. Sometimes you need to just sit and have a conversation and also update that conversation. Like a couple of
Yeah.
months ago, you might have said, well, I don't want to have kids. I don't want to be in a serious relationship. We're going to just be friends. But then feelings change and you haven't had that conversation. So one person is like, well, I have feelings now. The other person's like, well, I never felt like that about you before. So now
Yeah.
your feelings hurt. But did you have that
Yeah.
conversation?
Do you think that social media plays a part in how difficult it is for people to have conversations and and being to have understanding of what the relationship is? Like you said, the definition of what their relationship is?
I think that it does have an effect on it. I wouldn't say that it's all negative or all positive. I think it does have an effect.
Okay.
And you have to have the conversation of what that looks like. A lot of times people go into social media and they're like, well, I want it to look like this, or I want it to look like that, or I don't want it to look like this. I mean, I think about growing up watching these older shows, the Cosby Show, Leave It to Beaver, like all of these shows, and you saw these relationships and you saw these marriages, and it's like, well, I want mine to look like that. Well, baby, that's TV.
Yeah.
That ain't always real life. Like, let's have that conversation of, okay, let's have a conversation about what's reality. Sometimes you may not be able to be a stay-at-home mom. That just might not be in your financial plan. So how do we work with that? I say that you have to have that conversation with your person,
Mm-hmm.
not with your friend, not with this other person's person, not looking at somebody else's relationship, because their relationship is going to totally look different. But have
Mm-hmm.
that conversation about what you expect out of your relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree that it definitely has some sort of influence if that is your vice, if you look to social media for different things. It's so interesting. Many times in session, I have to stay fresh because people say, well, I don't know if you saw this video on TikTok, or I don't know if you saw this video on Instagram, but it talks
Mm-hmm.
about this, that, and that. And it's like some sort of relationship theory or an
Mm-hmm.
attachment theory, and people are self-diagnosing and trying to. I think it's really an attempt to try to figure out. Like, I recognize there are things within me that I would like to, address and fix. And I see how it is playing out in my life. And I'm trying to get some language around it, trying to get some understanding around it. So I do think it could be a helpful tool for some. But it's important to have those conversations too outside of just yourself and your phone. So you
Mm-hmm.
can get a little bit more clarification and understanding of maybe some areas, some blind spots that you didn't see, or some places, like Janice was saying, where we can come into reality and see, like, okay, the relationships that are before you, taking all of that information, how does that pertain to this?
Mm-hmm.
And even something that I wanted to touch on too is like, how have relationships been modeled for you?
Yeah.
There's a really great book out there. I'm not done with it yet, so I don't want to even lie, but um, it's by Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, and she's a licensed psychologist, and it's on sisterhood. And within one of the chapters, she's talking about how relationships and sisterhoods and things of that may have been modeled by people who raised you, like your so what did you hear from your mom and your aunts about relationships in general, or
Mm-hmm.
friendships as well. And we don't recognize how some of those things have influenced us as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask about that, about how whether you saw healthy relationships or
Hmm.
unhealthy relationships and how that impacts you going into a relationship, especially if you don't recognize that maybe you need to get some help with people
Hmm.
such as the two of you, and understanding that, hey, I never saw a really healthy relationship and I'm kind of unclear how to even start that. And I'm just wondering, have you experienced that in the work that you've done, or?
That is one of the reasons that Marriage Works Ministries came into
Mm.
place. It was something that God put on my heart a long time ago, and I just kept procrastinating. But it came because when me and my husband got married, we didn't see that. We didn't have a lot of healthy relationships around us. Like, we didn't see, like, both our parents, both of us came from single parent households. where our parents were married but got a divorce early in our lives. And like our family around us, we didn't see a whole lot of like positive relationships. So one of the things that we always focus on is let's help other people see the positive relationship. Like let's build this foundation or this program where people can see, they may not see it in their family or in their lifetime or whatever, but just be a place where people can come and say, okay, I may not have been raised in a positive relationship or seeing positive relationships, but I have something that I can build off of, something that, because the whole purpose of Marriage Works isn't so much for people that are having issues in their marriage, but for people that are wanting to strengthen their marriage.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Yeah. Because we don't, sometimes it can be difficult to recognize how those things influence us, our upbringing. And I think that sometimes when folks come from a space where it may have been a single parent household, or maybe even not, like their parents are just together to be together,
Mm-hmm.
I
mhm,
think that there are a
mhm,
lot of relationships and marriages like that too. Like, just from generations of old. Like, we've been together for 50 years, but y'all been together, but y'all just kind of roommates. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no romance to it. There is no real partnership as
mhm,
well. And so that can even be tricky too, of how you end up showing up in the relationship that you're currently in, which can sometimes come with a level of many different things, maybe feelings of shame, maybe feelings of inadequacy or defeat. Like, I don't know how to do this, I desire
Mm-hmm.
it, but I don't know how to do this. But I
mhm,
think it could also, what I try to encourage folks is that it can come with a level of freedom. Like, it's okay that you don't know. Like,
mhm,
let's get you the tools, the resources, the counseling, whatever it is that you need to be able to have that glorious relationship that you desire, whatever type of relationship that is.
mhm,
It doesn't have to be met with that shame or feelings of inadequacy. We can release that and embrace that spirit of freedom, that okay, like, I can learn something new, I can do something here that will be to my best benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that if, as you're trying to come together in relationships and build those relationships, you need to bring your whole self to some
Mhm.
extent.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think that how do we do that? How do we bring our whole selves into a relationship? And the other question is, when do we do that, right? So it's like, I just met you yesterday, but no, not quite now, right? So how do we do that?
I thought Janice, the marriage expert, was about to jump right in
Yeah,
and
I saw
give
that
it.
face. I wasn't
I
sure.
look. I was trying to not like take over and be the first to jump in on every question, so I was like, I'm gonna let Tempest answer this one first.
Yeah, well, I would say this. I am a firm believer of being unapologetically yourself in every situation, in every space. You don't want to go into a situation, or let alone a relationship of any
Mm-hmm.
form or kind, and not be yourself and try to put on. Of course, we have like our front for itself right now, even like with us being on this podcast. Like, I'm not gonna be out here slouching down. I want to put my my best, foot forward, my best face forward. And you do that too, like you're presenting self, but you don't want that to be so distant from your authentic self of who you actually are, because that's a lot to keep up and to put up. I think it's important to recognize that, yeah, you might, on a date night and stuff like that, first introducing yourself, a coffee date, whatever it may be, you may look all nice and everything, done up to the nines. But I think at a certain point, you want to be able to show that maybe you don't wear makeup all the time. Maybe you're not in heels 24/7, and that's okay.
I totally agree with you. I'm one of the ones that say, be who you are, because then you don't have to change, and nobody's confused or surprised at who you when you turn out to be this person that's different from what they thought. Um, Honesty and upfront, like what you see is what you get from me. You're gonna get the same thing every time. And I think that a lot of times, a friend of mine was like, "Yeah, his representative gonna leave in a minute." And I like the way
Hmm.
that she said that. She was like, "His representative." I'm like, "Oh, I like that you say his representative, because it's not his true self, but
Yeah.
eventually it'll come out." And I think that when we get comfortable with people or around people, that we're able to kind of let our hair down and be relaxed. And I say coming out the gate, be yourself. Like, yes, dress up. You want to, have your fancy dress up and get cute for your first date. But after that, it's like, okay, look, this is not always me. I'm not always in makeup and heels and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Mm-mm. So I definitely agree with like just being yourself. Your representatives gonna show themselves regardless, but at the end of the day, be yourself.
Absolutely. Oh, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm muted. I'm so sorry. I'm just talking away. So, um, I used to work with perpetrators of domestic violence, both male and females.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always talk to them about when you go out, your representative is meeting her representative, and that's who you are when you first meet each other, right? So it's good to hear that it's okay to let down, give yourself some time to let that kind of representative go out, and be who you really are. But to that point, I had a question as you two were talking. At what point are we in a relationship and not just dating or friends or
When you have the conversation, you
okay?
can't. You cannot just. I'm sorry, Tempest.
No,
but you
I completely agree.
you can't just automatically say, "Oh, we dating." No, 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 no. If you did not have that conversation with that person, that is not a date. You are still friends
Yes.
until you have that conversation and make it clear that we are dating and we're going to be just us. However,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be if we're going to date other people, but be clear. Don't just assume that, oh, we're in a relationship and oh, this is going to happen. No, that's when feelings get hurt. That's when things get misinterpreted. Be clear that we're in a relationship. It's not a relationship until you say it. Until the both of you are in agreement that it's a relationship. Not one sided relationship, but a full.
Absolutely. I agree. You have to define the relationship, and both parties, as you said, Janice, have to be in mutual agreement upon that. Well said. Nothing to add.
Okay, all right. Um, what are some? So let's talk about signs of healthy relationships. We can always, and we will talk about signs of unhealthy, but I always like to start from the positive end,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what are some signs that I know that this relationship is? If it's not, well, we're never completely healthy. I think we're always growing and
Mm-hmm.
learning and maturing in relationships. But how do I know when I'm on the right path to that healthy relationship?
Yeah, I think it starts with that establishment of being on the same page. Are we in this relationship first and foremost? And so I think that's a great determining factor of some good health in the relationship. We are on the same page as where we are in this relationship, in this space. I think another one is some people try to avoid, arguments, conflict, confrontation, but it's going to happen because
Mm-hmm.
we are not the same people. And, things will offend, things will get sticky and tricky and messy because we're all human beings. And so I think it's a sign of a healthy relationship that you do have confrontations, arguments, but that you do them well. And so we're not talking about like knockout, drag out fights, of course, like, being sure that there is no physical, emotional,
Mm-hmm.
mental abuse going on or violence happening in the relationship, but that you're able to fight fair and fight well. We're not, throwing low blows or things of that nature. And in addition to that, your recovery time, are you recovering at a good speed? Like, are we, if we're going to ice each other out,
Mm-hmm.
how long does that happen before that recovery takes place? Or is it you haven't heard from this person on weeks on end and then they just pop up like nothing happened? No, we're not doing that. Um, we have to recover well as well.
I totally agree with that. The healthy disagreements, and not letting them fester and just go and grow and something else happens into it. Like just having a disagreement, having a conversation about that disagreement, and moving forward, but not sweeping things under the rug, like, oh, we're not going to address that. That we just going to leave that there, because then it allows for the unhealthy relationship to fester, and it becomes a deeper problem and a bigger argument where it does become physical, emotional, verbal, all those things.
So, in a healthy relationship, does it mean that I'm like lockstep side by side with my partner all the time? Just curious.
No, it does not.
Okay.
Because even though you're in a relationship or a partnership with this person, you're still an individual. And
Mm-hmm.
two individuals have to have their own individual time, their own individual interests, their own individual space, so that when you do come together and you are like Velcro, as I call it, that you can still be healthy in that. Like, you can be healthy in your relationship together, and you're healthy in your relationship together, but apart. You have to have your own interests.
Absolutely. Like being able to, yes, rely upon one another, but also having other relationships that are supportive of you as well too. That's a marker of having healthy relationships
Mm-hmm.
outside of your romantic one, healthy friendships, like people who are going to support your relationship, people not talking ill upon it. Like if you do, go to that friend or that family member, whoever that person is you have a relationship with, and you're sharing, things that may be difficult in the relationship right now. It's a good, piece there of who you can talk to and who you cannot about the situation. Are they, promoting the health and wealth of your relationship, or are they like, see, I told you they was tired, I
Mm-hmm.
told you that, she was gonna be about this or he was gonna be about that. Yeah, we don't need that. And so that's a good piece too, to show that you have healthy relationships outside of your one as well.
Yes, sounds like who you kind of choose to be friends with, right? Some of that negativity can really rub off and impact you and your relationship with others as well. I'm curious. So talk a little bit about what some signs of unhealthy relationships are.
When they become physical, when they become emotionally draining and abusive, like, that's definitely a unhealthy relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when that person is your everything, like, you don't have outside relationships, you don't have outside friendships, you don't have outside interests. Everything is about what that person enjoys and loves, and you cling on to that, and you don't have your
Mhm.
own identity.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. To piggyback off of that, I would say, not being able to be your best self. And, are you comfortable at being your authentic, unapologetic self in the relationship? Are you feeling like you have to be someone else? And is your partner encouraging you to be your
Mm-hmm.
best self? Are you encouraging them to be their best selves? If that's not being promoted, if always has the upper hand, or that, one person is always better than, or something like along those lines, then that may be an indication that something is not healthy in the relationship, that there has to either be some adjustments made to help the relationship to survive, or there may have to be some adjustments made to start to get out of that relationship.
Yeah, because what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's this sense of control, because to me, that's what abuse is all about. It's all about
Mm-hmm.
power and control. And also this idea of um, having to kind of lose myself in the other person, right? And that can be, to me, one of those signs, I think, of unhealthy relationships as well. I would think. Um, but I'm just going to put an age out here, somewhere between, sorry, hold on one second. Sorry. I knew you couldn't get that sound out. That phone. I'm sorry. But I'm going to throw a number out here around, let's see, somewhere between 18 to 23, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know who my authentic self is yet,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, or my
Mhm.
best self. how do I get there? How do I don't want to wait till I get there to enter into a relationship, right? So, what do I need to look for, or think about as I'm starting to just know who I am and enter into a relationship?
I think one of the ways to address that is to not lose what your interests are. Because before you met that person, you had some type of interest, a hobby or something that you did that you enjoyed before that person came about. Don't lose that. Don't lose that thing. Because even though you don't know who you are, you don't know your authentic self, you know what you enjoyed beforehand. If it was traveling and they all of a sudden and they don't like to travel, then don't lose that. Then you have to kind of have the conversation of, hey, look, I like to travel. It's something that I enjoy doing. I would love for you to do it with me, but if that's not something that you want to do, either that's something I'm going to still do, or this isn't the right relationship for me.
Yeah. When I think about that question, my mind immediately goes to purpose. Like, what is that big question of like, what am I here on earth to do? Like, what is my life given purpose? And sometimes that's not necessarily revealed, at that age in your early 20s. For some it is, and that's okay too. I think being able to break down that in bite-sized pieces is helpful to digest. And so, who am I right now at this 18 to 23-year-old stage of life? That may look different, given a life experience that may happen, a life season that may happen, that may be further along in your years, because you will continue to change and evolve like core pieces of who you are. I think you can definitely begin to discover at that time and even earlier on. It's helpful to have people in your life, whether it's, your parents who have a positive influence, or guardians, or mentors, even pastors, leaders, advisors in your life, maybe during that time, where you may not necessarily be able to pinpoint or have the language for, but you have certain people in your life who could say like, oh my goodness, you have like such just a sweet presence about you, or I see the way that you talk to people and it sounds like you have like a really good listening ear, you're able to attune to people's needs, or you're such a great gift giver, like you're very thoughtful in that, or I see that you're a dynamic speaker. And so being able to begin to pinpoint maybe some of the things in regards to that, or have other people pinpoint them in your life, I feel like starts to give you a good pulse on just who you are. And so, yeah, you may not know every single thing. God knows I did not at that age. I thought I did. But I feel like where I am now, I've been able to see like, oh, I did recognize who I was in that season of life. And, there are some attributes of that self, core pieces of who I am, that are still very present um, now. And I believe that'll come too in years to come.
How large a role does listening play in a relationship? You talked about communicating and effectively communicating, and oftentimes it feels like I'm going to tell you what I want, I'm going to tell you what I need, I'm telling you. What role does listening have to play in that?
Huge role. I believe that listening is a great sign of emotional maturity, being able to see that there are other perspectives, other ways of seeing things, knowing things that are outside of your mind. And so it's important that you can attune and actually hear what someone else is saying, especially within partnership. I know what I feel, I know what I think, but being able to hear and attune to, and not just to hear to respond to shoot back, but actually really absorb what that person is saying.
I agree wholeheartedly. Listening is so important because you can miss a whole lot if you don't like pay attention to what's being said. And that's not just the verbal part, but the physical part too. Like the body language is very important. So yes, listen, I agree.
Sometimes it's those things that are unsaid as well, right? Sometimes you you try to elicit a certain response or try to elicit some conversation, and the person kind of avoids that topic or doesn't say a lot about it, I think that kind of absence of disclosure to some extent, maybe, or willingness to enter into discussions that are that make they can actually make people vulnerable.
Mhm.
That when people kind of avoid that, I think that speaks volumes as well. What do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hmm.
I agree
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah. So, have you seen? And these are not just, and I don't want to categorize this for young people because I think all of us at any point in time in our relationship development or in developing new relationships run into people that are not healthy themselves. And so, therefore, it's impossible to really establish, I think, a healthy relationship, right? What are some of those signs of unhealthiness that I should be concerned about? That I should say, oh, no, maybe not.
For the person maybe that you're in relationship with, or for yourself?
So I'm thinking about, maybe I've met someone, we're starting this relationship. We've agreed that we're going to start a
Mhm.
relationship. What are some of the signs that I should be aware of that are red flags for the relationship? Maybe that's a better way to put it.
I think
Besides communication, I'm just
yeah,
curious.
no, I think red flags are different for everybody. Like I think you have to know what your hard no is. Like you have to know your limits. Is something I say. You have to know what you're willing to accept and what you're not, and that could be different for a lot of. That could be different for everybody. Some people may not like certain attributes about somebody, like as far as physical appearance or whatever. But as far as red flags, like just what is that thing like? If you've been in a relationship where someone has been controlling, like pay attention to those little things that you feel like are controlling. A lot of times we know what it is that we don't want, but we don't say what it is that we don't want. We just kind of get into a relationship, be like, oh, I don't know if I'm okay with that, but not really, and then just keep going. So I think it's different for everybody else.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely think that it can vary. Um, all too often, we see it, and it can be things where, to an outsider, it would be obvious. Like, it's obvious that this is a red flag for you. But because maybe this person has a lot of other attributes, you think that, well, maybe I can change them, or I can change her, or she'll change her mind. Things like, having children, that is something to talk about within relationships. If a person is like, yeah, I definitely just don't want children, and that's not something that I envision for my life. People who may have different religious backgrounds and beliefs, and it gets to that point of, well, what are we going to do on Sundays, or what are we going to do, on whatever day of the week their religious practice may fall on. Those things, I know that there are some relationships out there that make it work, but at some point those things clash, and they may not necessarily fit together as well as you hoped, or you believe that a certain other aspect or attributes about you and that individual click so well that that'll just cover it up, but it'll
Mm-hmm.
start to affect the relationship for sure.
Yeah, I think anytime we go into a situation, I've even had couples get right to the altar, right? They're standing in front of me at the altar, and it's like, oh, but he'll change. Look, I know he'll change. I know she'll change as soon as we say I do. All of that's just going to change, right? It's going to be better. And trying to counsel people about that isn't usually the way it works. And to me, that might be a red flag that this is not something that, not to say that this isn't the relationship for you, but maybe you're not ready for it at this point. I think I've seen people romanticize that control issue. Oh, he just or she just cares so much about me that they want to know where I am every moment of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so wonderful until it's not. And I'm just wondering,
Or it's
have
so
you?
cute.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or it's so cute. Um, oh, he walked around and found me on campus. He really must have wanted to see me. And then later you find out that there's a whole stalking issue going on. Not to say all people are stalkers, but
Mm-hmm.
those to me are some of those red flags that we probably should think about. Maybe,
Hmm.
I don't know.
No, absolutely.
Hmm.
And you will
Absolutely.
probably be able to, definitely share a lot of those given your background in domestic violence.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. But there are healthy relationships out there, and that's the part that I think the two of you and I think that we should try to continue to hold up to people, that there are healthy there is such a thing as a healthy relationship, right? um
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So Janice, I know in the work that you do, and you talked about working, your story, sharing your story, I guess,
Hmm.
with others. Have you found that having other couples share their stories with young couples is or Tempest, maybe you've experienced that as well. Is that helpful to people in relationships?
In my experience, it has been helpful. We've had different groups and conversations of multiple married couples,
Mm-hmm.
and just to hear the bouncing back from each other. Well, yeah, we did this, and oh, well, that works, and that makes sense. Like, it definitely makes a difference to have um, not so much role models, but examples of what a healthy relationship looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's any hurt or harm to, as Janice was saying, to have, couples who may mentor you or that you seek advice from, or you have a personal, individual mentor. And I think all of those relationships are needed and necessary to have like a relationship where you're connected to a top and connected to a, someone that you're also kind of bringing up and raising up as well. I think both of those relationships are essential, as well as the ones that, are side by side that we can walk arm in arm in.
And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't always have to be the positive relationships or the positive aspects of your relationship. Like,
Okay.
you and your mate got into an argument about something and you're sharing it with another couple or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
another set of couples, you can, the conversations that come out of that, and um, how the women might take the man's side and the men might take the women's side, like, it just, the dynamics of it and just hearing it and being able to listen to it and see it grow and flourish is amazing whenever we have
Wow.
these couple sessions and everybody can talk and share, and it's not a bashing thing either. Like, it's just a, oh, well, maybe you should, maybe if you saw it from this way, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe if he saw it from that way, like, just the camaraderie in those relationships is amazing to see it happen.
Wow. I can imagine. I
Absolutely.
can only imagine. Is we talk about coming to the relationship with our authentic selves, and to
Mm-hmm.
be, to some extent, to be vulnerable as well. And I mean that from the standpoint of we're willing to share some uncomfortable, in uncomfortable places and spaces, right? Because I don't mean vulnerability as though someone's going to take advantage of me,
Mm-hmm.
but to just be able to say, I probably wouldn't have talked about this with just anyone, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
put myself out there. So understanding that, you want that in a relationship, the authenticity, the ability to kind of be vulnerable. How important is honesty in a relationship? Can it hurt a relationship? Is it always helpful in a relationship? Just blatant honesty.
I think that honesty is very important in a relationship. I think that if you're being honest, if you're being openly honest, and not with the intention of trying to hurt someone, then it can be very helpful. But if you're trying to be honest, where it's brutally honest, and you're trying, and your intention is to hurt somebody, then it can be very unhealthy. But honesty, I think, is great when it's done, not correctly, but when it's done with good intentions.
Yeah.
Right spirit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When it's not, utilized as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can be blatantly honest, as you put it, Reverend Karen, and it doesn't have the right tone or the right intention behind it, and that's when it can be, detrimental
Mm-hmm.
to a relationship, but more so that individual as well too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so within honesty, I advise, tap into that discernment. Make sure that one, that you are doing it from a space where you're not trying to inflict harm because you feel hurt from something,
Mhm.
but that you're doing it from a space of transparency and vulnerability, and wanting to have that openness in the conversation, or relationship.
Interesting. So, when I think about being in a relationship, whether it's a long term relationship, including a long term marriage, when do when do I know that it's time for us to get third party assistance in trying to help us in this relationship? I'm just any thoughts about that?
I think any time's a good time, but that's, I'm biased, um, from my
I was like,
line
I'm
of
gonna let
work.
the expert go on this one.
Yeah, I think, I'm a little bit biased in that I recently spoke with someone who, just proactively, nothing necessarily going on that they didn't feel like that they can resolve in and of themselves, but maybe like, hey, if we come in, perhaps there are some blind spots, or we can get some new tips, or some new things, ways of thinking and being, maybe different ways to enhance our relationship as well, go deeper in some spaces. I think it's any time is a good time, but certainly when it gets to a point where you're feeling like, you know what, I feel like that we're reaching a wall here, and we keep getting to this same space, not being able to work around it, feeling like we're having that same argument over and over again, and maybe things will change for a little bit, but then it'll go back into that same space. And so I advise people, before you seek couples counseling, or you can do it in tandem with both, it's important that you also seek individual counseling as well,
Mhm.
because there can be some roadblocks, some things happening just in and of yourself. Like you, as Janice mentioned earlier, you all are still two individuals coming together to work on this partnership. And so
Mhm.
it's important that you still do that individual work. And so when you do come into that partnership, you're like, okay, I got the tools that I need to get together with the stuff in my own self, and to be able to open to receive what's going on in yours. And that's where the couples counseling can really start working and doing its thing. But if you just going in and pointing the finger and not seeing that, oh, I could probably use some work myself,
Mhm.
it can be problematic.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Totally agree. I have nothing to add. I
You
totally
know,
agree.
I can remember times when people would come in. They've been married for a while, but they're really looking for someone to give them permission to say it's okay to end the relationship,
Sure.
and they haven't done, as you said, the individual work needed to be done. So I would always refer them out to do their individual work.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
can still work as a couple, but I can't work with you individually. But you have to, work on what the issues are that are going on within you. And so oftentimes I think when people come in to see a therapist, especially they go in to see marriage, for marriage counseling, sometimes they're kind of at a place where they have to make a decision. Do I want this person to see me as part of a couple, or do I want them to see me individually because I got some work to do? Because I know you can't
Mhm.
probably see them as both, right? Because of those dual relationship things. But I just think that getting to see someone is one of the most important pieces, because typically you have worn out girlfriends, best friends, mom and daddy, everybody, and it's like, yeah, it's time to maybe go in and talk to someone, to see what other information you can learn, and tips that you can get on how to build those healthy relationships. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And those relationships, as we talked about before, having, influences from friends and, family and things of that nature, they're important and they're great to have, but they cannot speak objectively. Like they know you, they know the person usually that you're talking to, and they're going to present a certain level of bias. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where a third party is really helpful, because they're able to kind of hear the story freshly, with fresh ears, with fresh eyes, and be able to assess from a space where they're not leaning more towards you or leaning more towards your partner,
Mm-hmm.
and just being able to work with you both, without the bias. And it's great. Our friends should be biased. They should be championing us and all of that.
Yep.
But it could be tricky when you're trying to get a little bit more information of where are my blind spots.
Yeah.
And they've heard all of the good and the bad. So depending on what you coming in with on that day, they either gonna be like, okay, champion for you, or well, you should do
Yeah.
this, and they're gonna give their unbiased opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. How do you, in your the work that you do you ever have to dispel some misinformation that people get off of the internet, or maybe even from friends? Do you ever have to deal with
Yes, people give, and it's not intentionally. Oh, it's not always intentional bad information, but a lot of times it's bad information that you gotta. So let's think about that. What was the intent behind that? Where did that come from, and why was that said? Like sometimes they take things that were meant for good and they turn it into something totally like on a whole nother. They go down a whole different lane. It's like that's not. I don't think that's what that meant. What they meant by that, but let's talk about that.
Sure. In the day and age of social media, Google, WebMD, all the different facets that you have readily access to, at your fingertips, where they're great resources, oftentimes, but without someone who has studied, without someone who has actually, maybe gotten some expertise or in those fields, it could be a little bit dangerous.
yeah.
So yes, definitely having to share with folks, who may come in and have self-diagnosed themselves or their partners or their friends, family members, all the above. They'll say, so what do you think? Do you think that that's what it is? Well, let's
Hmm.
let's go all the way back to the first step here before we get to the diagnosing piece,
Yeah.
and talk about what is it that you're feeling, or what is it that you're thinking, or what's going on. And even if it were that type of diagnosis, or that type of resolution that you've reached, what now? How does that make you feel?
Right.
What would you do with that if that were true or
Yeah.
not true?
I always love it when someone's so ready to give someone else a diagnosis, as if fix her, fix him,
Oh, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. So, and this has been, I think, a very, very informative and fruitful conversation. I want, as we're starting to wrap up, though, I wondered if you could come up with 3 tips that you would give individuals who are looking, let's look at it this way, who are either looking to strengthen their relationship
Mm-hmm.
or looking to discern whether this is healthy or not, right? Or just thinking about what they need to do for themselves when they realize that they're in a difficult or challenging relationship. Just, 2 or 3 tips that you would give them.
I would say one of my tips is to, one, be your authentic self off top. Make sure you're doing your individual work. Be open and ready to receive your partner's work as well too, them being able to do their individual work. And a tip that I share with all couples, is to have some sort of check-in, a weekly check-in, however you do it, whether you do it daily, every 3 days, every 5 days. I say I even do it personally within my own marriage. And that can be maybe a set of questions that you all have decided, But what you're wanting to do is create that intentional, safe space to open up those lines of communication. So we're not doing like a business meeting. We're not talking about like, finances and the budget or whatever like that. We're talking about what's actually going on in and of ourselves. A helpful way of doing it and structuring that conversation is through the 4 W's. And so starting off with your wows and then going into wounds, going into worries, and then wishes. And so you want to start on an upswing of wows, like what's happening in your world that's going well. You can go, then they can go. Kind of toss it back and forth. What are some highlights, some things that you're excited about that's happened? And this is a great time too to give your partner praise, because sometimes in conversations you ready, you hot and ready to unlock and load it, of all the things that they've done wrong, how they done stepped on your toes, how they done got on your nerves. But this is a great time to really show some praise, like, I really loved when you did this. I believe that when you said this, I felt heard. Being able to really get into the nuance of the praise of being able to share that with your partner. And then going into things that are wounds. Sometimes my husband and I will say, for wounds and worries, we'll say woundish or worried-ish, because it doesn't, like, where it's not real heavy hitter on the wounds. It's not like a big wound, but maybe I felt like a little bit offended about something. And that could be something that your partner did or something that happened in an outside relationship, whether it's a family or friend, on the job, whatever it may be. And then going into worries, things that's bringing you concern, things that's kind of been on your mind lately. And then you're going to end on that upswing of wishes, things that you're hoping for. I tell couples, get creative with it. If you are a couple of faith and your faith is important to you, maybe you open up in prayer and close in prayer. I love a couple that I know, they will ask them, what's your beverage of choice? Because they'll do it, once the kids go down. And it's not necessary. I say, like, don't get into the alcoholic beverages now. Don't, we're not trying to have a tipsy conversation. We want to be very sober minded, but like they'll do like a cup of tea or, a soda or something like that, or share a snack together. That's a beautiful way of being able to, incorporate those things and really spice it up a little bit.
I love that. I love the 4 W's. For me, I would say communicate. Like, that's one that I always say, because you can get a lot out of it, a lot out of that communicating, and communicate effectively. Like, not at all be, well, you did this, but what? Not that you did everything wrong, but what did I do right? Like, just communicating in that. Talking about refreshing whatever our conversations have been. Where are we now? Checking in, making sure that things are okay. How are we feeling? Those are my two. I don't know what the third one would be. I love what Tempest was saying about all of those things, but I don't know what my third one would be. That's something I have to think about.
Don't know how many people will be actually viewing this podcast and where they might be in the country. But I'm curious, is there a way that people can connect with you online or through email or anything that you'd want to share? I don't know if you have, like, with your practice, if you talk to people, I don't know, from wherever, or are you limited to just Virginia? Or just curious in doing the work that you do, Tempest.
So I am licensed in the state of Virginia and in North Carolina.
Okay.
I do not do couples counseling though.
All
So
right.
I know, shocker, but I will hit you with the individual work. And so
Okay.
come
All right.
see me still. And you can contact me through my website, www.empowermentccllc.com. You can also email me at info@empowermentccllc.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty sure it's empowermentccllc. And you can reach me there too.
Okay. And Janice, I know you do a ministry with couples. Is there any way to reach out to you as well?
So we have a Facebook group, which is Marriage Works Ministries LLC. I think it's LLC, but it's Marriage Works Ministries. It's also an Instagram that is Marriage Works Ministries. And then my email is marriageworksministries at gmail.com, I think. Don't quote me.
Okay. Okay.
The
All right.
website is a work in progress.
Okay. All right. Because I'm hoping that, people will contact us and let us know what else they might like to hear. And also if we can refer them to you just for more information. And we would love to have you both come back. This has been so very informative, I think, today. And I hope that, that you kind of enjoyed it as well. Definitely.
Yes, I
Thank you
have
for having
enjoyed
me.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you for having
Yeah.
me. And I'm open
Good.
anytime.
Thank you both.